Welcome back. Welcome to episode 2 of the Tolstoy Diaries featuring War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I'm so excited you're here. I'm just so excited about this book this morning. Oh my goodness. If you have not seen, if you have no idea what this is about, I am part of a book club called the Dickens versus Tolstoy, The Great Debate, where we are reading all of Charles Dickens and all of Leo Tolstoy's works. Ever. As you can see, the journey this time is War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. I will leave all of the links up above to announcements or anything like that. And as I said, this is part 2. So if you would like to watch part 1, where I read the first 200 pages of War and Peace, I will also leave that up above. But regardless, welcome back. Today, I'm starting off War and Peace at the 300 page mark, which is so exciting. Only 1,000 pages left to go. Also, hi, very exciting. We got a sponsor for the second episode of the Tolstoy Diaries, and this one is perfect because I am thanking Babbel so much for sponsoring today's video. We're gonna learn Russian. I have been obsessed with learning languages for a very long time. I went through French immersion schooling in high school and stuff like that, and then when I got to university, I added Italian into the mix. I thought now would be the perfect time, while I'm in the middle of this 4-year Dickens versus Tolstoy book club, to read War and Peace in Russian. Are you kidding me? So Babbel uses like real life situations and dialogues and conversations that you would potentially be having with someone. No like weird contrived sentences like "my cat is eating a grapefruit." On top of that, they don't use robots to teach their classes. Each language course is curated by 150 plus language teachers. A lot of university studies have shown that doing 15 hours of Babbel equals 1 semester at college of, for example, Spanish, if that was the language you were taking. You can use my code to buy 6 months and then get 6 months free. Thank you so much, Babbel, for sponsoring today's video, and let's go watch me Babbel. This is gonna be probably another maybe 200 page journey, or we'll just see how it goes, you know? We'll see what comes up. But as you can see, can you see this? Ooh. I've really tabbed so much. Yeah, I'm just so excited. So I'll take you through it. I will say, I'll try to keep out some spoilers, but generally right now there haven't been like, I think anything spoilery I could really tell you. My general thoughts right now, I'm really still liking it. Like, I'm really having fun reading it. There's definitely been a lot of really beautiful language, and there's been so much repetition as well in Tolstoy so far in terms of when he's describing the movement and the form of the army itself and what that's like. So I think I want to show you those scenes because they're just so powerful. I'm not sure if me as a reader, as subjective as I am and can't make myself otherwise, I'm not sure if I enjoy those scenes where he'll just repeat kind of one word or one sentence and kind of shift it around to like really immerse you in it and really like hammer it down that like this is what's going on, this is important. For example, he has this one scene where he talks about fog so much. He has another scene where he talks about machines and cogs and wheels and the movements of machinery a lot, and it's just a lot. But regardless, I thought we could go through, I guess, maybe everything up from the last time I closed off my first Tolstoy vlog. I guess to start with the army, there's just been a lot, like I said, of really beautiful description and ways of framing the army. The first one, I think this is the last thing I closed off the vlog with, was when it's kind of like an ocean and the movements and the swell of the waves are like the men marching and stuff like that, which was a really beautiful scene. In terms of characters right now, I'm definitely warming up to Prince Andre. Before, I really did not like him because when he first appears on the scene, he's just extremely moody, dramatic, sullen, a little bit pretentious, a little bit mean to a lot of people, but we're really seeing kind of why his character is like that and why maybe he is the way that he is. He has an awful relationship with his wife, and so much of it so far has been concerned with these men on the front in the battlefield, these soldiers, just wanting glory and fame for themselves, not really caring or seeming to care or know too much about the terrors and horrors and outcomes and consequences of war and violence, but just wanting to garner all of this fame and recognition for themselves. We have so many scenes of like fantasy from the minds of Andre and Nikolai and literally everyone just imagining themselves being like the savior and the hero of the Russian army and stuff like that. And so I think hopefully these men are really going to see kind of the darker side of that and not just wanting to get all of this like fame and recognition for themselves, but seeing that war is war. Nikolai has gotten a little bit of that so far because he's been wounded. He's seen like real action in front of him. He's seen his friends die and stuff like that, and I think he's slowly pulling back maybe those fantasies a little bit. But we've had a lot with the Emperor Alexander and the Tsarevich as well, and like when the Russian emperor is like on the scene on the battlefield, everyone is like so enamored. They all fall in love with Alexander and they're like, I will die for him, I will give up my life for him gladly, I wish I could die in front of his eyes. And so it's like this very kind of dangerous infatuation and patriotism and idealism and stuff like that, which like goes hand in hand with those fantasies of kind of war stories that the men want for themselves. But there's so much room in this book. We have another 1,000 pages for all of that development to kind of develop, I guess. But I also really love the parallel when we do switch back to like Moscow or Petersburg and like the drawing rooms and the balls and women's society and stuff like that, the parallel that Tolstoy creates between the battlefield and what's going on in like the drawing rooms. It's very much kind of the same description and the same problems that are faced, and the way that he figures these scenes and events is very interesting because for example, we have Anna Pavlovna, who is in the excited condition of a commander on a battlefield to whom thousands of new and brilliant ideas occur which there is hardly time to put into action. Seeing Pierre touched his sleeve with her finger and said blah blah blah. It's just really interesting kind of how that parallel, I think, lends a little bit more credence and importance to what goes on in like society, and lends a little bit more of like a farce and theater to war and the costumes of war. For example, Pierre is a really interesting character because he embodies a lot, I think, of that juxtaposition. He's a man, he's not at the front, he's in society, he is currently being very pressured by everyone around him. He's recently come into so much money because he's inherited his late father's title of Count Bezukov and his money and stuff like that, but he is kind of fighting for this new life he has, and also fighting to maintain these relationships to please everyone around him, and he is now grappling with marriage to Prince Vasily's daughter. There's also a lot about like this line, the unknown, like on the battlefield it is the line into no man's land, and there's so many beautiful gorgeous scenes where Tolstoy's talking about it. But in society and with Pierre, for example, Pierre knew that everyone was waiting for him to say a word and cross a certain line, and he knew that sooner or later he would step across it, that an incomprehensible terror seized him at the thought of that dreadful step. 1,000 times during that month and a half, while he felt himself draw nearer and nearer to that dreadful abyss, Pierre said to himself, what am I doing? I need resolution. Can it be that I have none? And then we kind of switch back to the battlefield by page like 260 in chapter 8, and we kind of see the Tsar is there. And Nikolai Rostov is just like imagining dying for him. He felt that at a single word from that man, all this vast mass, and he himself an insignificant atom in it, would go through fire and water, commit crimes, die, or perform deeds of highest heroism. And so he could not but tremble, and his heart stand still at the imminence of that word. There's been a lot. I've been using orange to keep track of those times when like the characters in War and Peace feel that their life is out of their own hands, that something else is controlling them. With kind of the introduction of the Emperor, it's really interesting how he takes on this like god-like figure, and a lot of that fate becomes attributed to Alexander, like the Emperor, especially through the eyes of Nikolai and Andre and stuff like that. They really feel that the Emperor is kind of the one pulling all the strings, and that they have no autonomy of their own, which like is an interesting thing, because we have like the orange tabs that I'm using alone for times when like they just feel like puppets. The characters feel like puppets and something else is pulling their strings, this fate or this destiny or this very deterministic outlook, which could be attributed to like history and the actions and decisions of thousands of people that come before them and after them and during their own time. And then we also have the Emperor Alexander and kind of all of Russia, which is a thing in this book as well, which is interesting. So he plays a different part in, I think, the bigger part of like fate and having no control and everything kind of being pre-decided for you. Yeah, it's just really interesting. We had kind of like a Frankenstein moment, I want to call it, where the Tsar comes up and it says, till the Tsar reached it, each regiment in its silence and immobility seemed like a lifeless body. But as soon as he came up to it, it became alive, its thunder joining the roar of the whole line along which he had already passed. Through the terrible and deafening roar of those voices, Amid the square masses of troops standing motionless as if turned to stone, hundreds of riders composing the suites moved carelessly but symmetrically, and above all freely, and in front of them, the emperor. Something kind of with Prince Andre that maybe kind of talking about in juxtaposition with Dickens, because that's kind of what we're doing, is comparing all of their work and deciding which ones we think are is the best author and which ones we prefer. But I think with Dickens, kind of when a character comes on a scene, he's really good at letting you know like immediately who they are, and you seem to just know them like inevitably and immediately when you meet them. Whereas with Tolstoy, like I said with Prince Andre, like I didn't really know who he was. Like we get these general ideas within each scene, and the reader is like really there interacting with him, and he's really like changing, and Tolstoy just like lets you meet someone slowly and get to know someone slowly, which is definitely more natural, but also kind of frustrating at times, because you're like, well, maybe I don't like you, or like maybe I do. But with Dickens, I think when someone comes on the page, you're like, yes, that's who you are, and I either like you or dislike you. Where with Andre, he's always evolving and changing, and we're seeing him learn things and cast old views off and take new ones on and stuff. And so they're just like, I don't know, I guess it is more real, but I think there's like points for each, and it's definitely just like a kind of your own preference, really. This one was just a really nice full page of like description, repetition, and stuff like that, and then it was ended by a really nice quote that I liked that says, "Just as in a clock the result of the complicated motion of innumerable wheels and pulleys is merely a slow and regular movement of the hands which show the time, so the result of all the complicated human activities of 160,000 Russians and French, all their passions, desires, remorse, humiliation, sufferings, outbursts of pride, fear, and enthusiasm, was only the loss of the Battle of Austerlitz, the so-called Battle of the Three Emperors. That is to say, a slow movement of the hand on the dial of human history." So good. All right, anyway, I'm gonna stop talking because I've been talking a while about kind of what I've been thinking of it so far, but I just want more like kind of emotional intensity. Like there is a lot there, but I think like as we watch these characters grow up, I have no idea what span of time War and Peace covers. Like I said, I went into this pretty much blind, which was interesting, but I'm really excited to see what happens. So I'm gonna sit down and read right now. I can't believe I hit the 300 page mark, which is so exciting, but okay, let's do it. Oh my gosh, I just made it to book 2 in War and Peace, which is like 300 and something pages, I think 317 pages through, but the whole, like literally the whole scene before we get to book 2, I've like marked something on every single page. My chest is so tight right now, like it just made me feel so anxious. Like we just had the Battle of Austerlitz happen. It's probably not a spoiler. I mean, a lot of this is just history, so it's known that it does not go well at all for the Russians and the Austrians, and like just seeing it through the eyes of Andre and Nikolai, who are two like main protagonists, the two main soldiers in this battle that we get to follow. It's so hard to read. Like Tolstoy has really been taking his time showing us, like I was talking about a few minutes ago, the kind of like, I don't know, pomp, really kind of fakeness of the soldiers and what they just want out of this war. They just want fame and they're like excited by it, but then the Battle of Austerlitz happens and it is so heartbreaking and sad. There's so much death, and Tolstoy is like, he just tells you so bluntly with like no embellishment. He just like is so plain. There's nothing there masking or mirroring his words. It's like a direct cry to the reader of what is happening. And just some of the descriptions, for example, Dolohov gets stuck on a bridge, and he is one of the only people left in his squadron living, and just like what happens there is just so extremely realistic. We finally get that like really jarring juxtaposition next to Andre and Nikolai's wishes for grandeur and greatness, and I think it just makes it all the more crushing after like most of what we've had of the war so far has been pretty toned down, pretty bureaucratic, and all of these like very set up scenes of like not so much fighting and these real people, but kind of very privileged people wanting to be seen as really great. And then all of a sudden this battle happens and all of that immediately is stripped away, especially when we get to see through Prince Andre's viewpoint, because he is wounded very badly and he gets taken by the French. And we actually just had Napoleon on here, I think, say his first few speaking lines, which is exciting. But yeah, I just was not expecting that, but I think because of the effect I was talking about, where we had that lead up through the war and then all of a sudden all of it stripped away, it was just so powerful. And like it honestly just took my breath away. And I'm sitting here and like it made me feel very anxious, and it's just like so good, it's so powerful. I think this is finally what I've been waiting for. Like I feel like I was enjoying War and Peace, I was enjoying it fine, and then we just got to the Battle of Austerlitz and I'm like, there he is, there is Tolstoy, here he is. Oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I think this is what I've been waiting for with this book, and I just want to cry. It's just so powerful. I'll read you some of the few scenes where Andre, he comes out of that, and like literally what I was talking about right before I sat down to read the scene, where he's like realizing what war is and how it's affecting him, and it's letting him see life through the suffering. He's like holding up the suffering and seeing through it. It's just crazy. Napoleon is talking about him and he's like, oh, there's a fine dead young man. But Andre isn't dead, and he says he heard the words as he might have heard the buzzing of a fly. Not only did they not interest him, but he took no notice of them and at once forgot them. His head was burning, he felt himself bleeding to death, and he saw above him the remote, lofty, and everlasting sky. He knew it was Napoleon, his hero, but at that moment Napoleon seemed to him such a small, insignificant creature compared with what was passing now between himself and that lofty, infinite sky with the clouds flying over it. There's been so much about this sky, like it's insane. I think I was talking about how the repetition of the fog before the battle was like really hammered down, and now coming out of that is Prince Andre's like clear, lofty, infinite blue sky. He's constantly talking about him. It's like this epiphany that he's having. The fog is lifted, both literally and figuratively, and it's just so good. So insignificant at that moment seemed to him all the interest that engrossed Napoleon. So mean did his hero himself with his paltry vanity and joy in victory appear, compared to that lofty, equitable, and kindly sky which he had seen and understood that he could not answer. Everything seemed so futile and insignificant in comparison with the stern and solemn train of thought that weakness from loss of blood, suffering, and the nearness of death aroused in him. Looking into Napoleon's eyes, Prince Andre thought of the insignificance of greatness, the unimportance of life which no one could understand, and the still greater unimportance of death, the meaning of which no one alive could understand or explain. It's just so good that I can't even. And now we had that scene, and then we go right into book 2, and just feeling so overwhelmed. That just like came out of nowhere. It took 300 pages to hit me in the face, but it hit me in the face. And now I'm like obsessed with this book. I went from like really liking it to being obsessed with it. As you can see, I'm also like very slowly cracking the spine, which is very satisfying. I'm gonna take a break because wow. And then I will come back to this later, but wow. All right, hey, another Tolstoy check-in point. Today is Saturday, April 17th. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Yeah, I think today's the 17th. And I'm here with War and Peace. It's a bit later in the day. I think it's almost 5 o'clock or something, but got all my work done. I filmed the video today, and I've just been thinking about reading this book all day. So that is how far of the way I am through, and oh my gosh. Like I said, I've just been thinking about this book all the time in my mind. I'm just like, when can I go back and read more War and Peace? When am I gonna have time to read War and Peace? I want to read War and Peace. Like, I'm just thinking about it so much. I think the last time we talked to each other was I was starting book 2, right? Part 1. So today I am 352 pages through. I'm on chapter 10 of part 1 of book 2 of War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, and I'm very happy about it. Like, I cannot tell you how much I want to write on this book. I want to write so much about War and Peace. I was not expecting, like I said last time, to just absolutely adore it so much and never want it to end, but a lot has happened actually since I finished book 2. I'm gonna try not to make this too spoilery, but I think like I do want this to be a good record of my thoughts of War and Peace, and unfortunately that will entail probably some spoilers. So if you have not yet got to page 352 or chapter 10 of part 2 of War and Peace, maybe avert your ears for a little bit. I'll try to be like pretty good about telling you if I'm spoiling something, but this might be a spoiler for Andre, but yeah, maybe I'll put some timestamps. I'll try to put some timestamps. So skip to the timestamp. Are you gone? Okay. Andre met Napoleon because Andre was wounded in the Battle of Austerlitz and he's taken prisoner. So he meets Napoleon, and it's just so beautiful the way his kind of heroic view and perspective of Napoleon, once meeting this absurd short little man, just immediately vanishes, and he's like, this is all so silly. What are we doing here? And then book 2 begins, and we are immediately back with the Rostovs and stuff like that, which is interesting to see how their family dynamic is going. I think at the minute I'm really not liking Nikolai anymore. He's just, I don't know, I'm definitely more liking Andre. I think Andre might be my favorite character now, which is interesting because at the start of this whole War and Peace thing, like I said, I wasn't really liking him too much. I thought he was distant and moody and mean, but now I think he might be my favorite character, which is really interesting. Nikolai has just grown so dumb. I feel like Andre is someone who's like, he's learning from his surroundings and his experiences, but Nikolai is just like this young little excited, very idealistic, but in kind of the wrong way almost. And of course Pierre, actually really interestingly, like he's just so dumb. He's just being so dumb, and I can't take it. Like, I just want to shake Pierre. I just want to like, I'm just like, what are you doing? Because Pierre did get married to Prince Vasily's daughter, Helene, and they've been married for a little bit, but then he starts to hear all these rumors that his wife has been having an affair. Yeah, that his wife has been having an affair with Dolohov, who is Nikolai's friend. And so Pierre challenges Dolohov, and there are disastrous consequences. But there was this really nice quote from Pierre, at least when he's thinking about what he wants to do with this information, and he says, "Who is right and who is wrong? No one. But if you are alive, live. Tomorrow you'll die, as I might have died an hour ago. And is it worth tormenting oneself when one has only a moment of life in comparison with eternity?" So that was good. But like Pierre, I'm just really not liking right now. I'm sure he's gonna develop so much because there's already been so much character development. And we actually just had our first kind of major character death, I think. Obviously we've had soldiers die in battles and stuff like that, but no, I don't think any title character, right? Unless I'm missing someone, but I think I would have marked it down. We actually just had someone die, and I am gonna spoil it again. Please skip to this time if you don't want to be spoiled, but I thought it was really interesting because it's not in a battle, it's not on the front, it's not on the battlefield, it's not in the war or anything like that. It is Prince Andre's wife. Yeah, it's Prince Andre's wife, Lise, because when he leaves her at his parents' house and with his sister Maria, and Andre goes off, Lise is pregnant, and then Andre just gets back. He like waltzes onto the scene when everyone thinks he's dead, and like his father's like erecting the statue as a monument in his honor, and his sister Maria is just so upset because everyone thinks he's dead. No one can find his body. The army sent off a letter basically saying your son's probably dead, and then literally he returns on the night that his wife goes into labor, but unfortunately he arrives and he kind of goes into the bedroom and she is dead from childbirth. So it's just, like I said, I've been trying to keep track of like the parallels that Tolstoy is drawing between like the drawing room, society life, home life, and the horrors of war, and a lot of what is phrased as like difficulties or really hard events in your life and consequences and things that we go through just in our everyday life, even today. Tolstoy phrases them in such a way to be comparable and to draw a parallel to the battlefield. And so it was interesting that like the first major death isn't one from the battlefield, it's one in labor and in childbirth. So I think it's just really interesting, and a lot of like the women as well have been described as being commanders or people in charge of an army when they're hosting a party or leading someone to dinner or organizing these groups of people at different tables at a party and stuff like that. Like the language that Tolstoy uses in even his adjectives and his descriptions, and the way that he'll use the scenes of the battlefield to describe these scenes of peace, but also things that are hard to go through and stuff like that, and especially childbirth. I think it's just so interesting to have that parallel, and it's something I really, really love. But anyway, so I'm on page 352. I'm like too excited to keep talking about it, so I'm just gonna go read a little bit, and this is kind of my only plan for tonight. I just want to read War and Peace and just get through a little bit more of it and just do some more frequent updates with you guys. So I'm hoping this will be enjoyable, and let's have a cozy night with Tolstoy. Okay, I have officially cried. I officially cried at War and Peace, and nothing sad even happened. Page 417. I don't know. I can't tell you what happened. If I clearly see, that ladder leading from plant to man, why should I suppose it breaks off at me and does not go farther? I feel that I cannot vanish, since nothing vanishes in this world, but that I shall always exist and always have existed. I feel that beyond me and above me there are spirits, and that in this world there is truth. Yes, said Prince Andre, but it is not that which can convince me. Life and death are what convince. What convinces is when one sees a being dear to one, bound up with one's own life, before whom one was to blame and had hoped to make it right, and suddenly that being is seized with pain, suffers, and ceases to exist. Why? It cannot be that there is no answer. All I say is that it is not argument that convinces me of the necessity of a future life, but this, when you go hand in hand with someone, and all at once that person vanishes there, into nowhere, and you yourself are left facing that abyss and look in. And I have looked in. Me too, Andre. Hello. Hey. Hi. Are you okay? I'm not okay. I'm not okay. I am so not okay. This is not a drill. I think the last clip you saw was me once again bawling my eyes out to this book. Not gonna spoil anything, but it was the oak tree scene. If you know, you know. The oak tree. Andre is an oak tree. I think that was the only thing I wrote down in the margin. Andre is an oak tree. What does it mean? Who knows? So I'm here to give another little update. I'm currently on page 494, which is crazy. I'm gonna hit over the 500 page mark today, which is so cool. Today is April 22nd or 23rd, one or the other. It's Saturday. This morning I woke up at 6 a.m. just because, I don't know, War and Peace was calling me. I wanted to read it. So it's now, I think, like 9:35. I've been pretty productive this morning, but, oh guys, this book. If you can't tell, I'm absolutely loving it. I don't even know where I left you last time we talked about it, but so much has happened. Had some really great talks. My favorite ones so far have been between Pierre and Andre because they've been meeting again. They've been talking mostly about philosophy and about God and about right and wrong and about how you should live your life and stuff like that, which has been so incredible. Yeah, we also have a lot of debate about the serfs. Pierre, I think, wants to free them, and he has freed them. And then we have Andre, who's now back from the war, and he's decided he's done. He's done with that whole scene, and he just wants to stay at home and essentially take on the lowest kind of involved position. But then Pierre shows up, obviously, and starts talking to him, and it's just such a stirring scene. Like, it is ridiculous. It is so good. I am alive. That is not my fault. So I must live out my life as best I can without hurting others. Life as it is leaves one no peace. Oh my gosh, that's from Andre. Incredible, just absolutely incredible. This page, as you can see, merited 4 tabs, I suppose. Yeah, this one was just so good. It's Pierre and Andre, once again. Best duo, honestly. Karen and I have also been talking about it, and I think my favorite character so far is Andre, although everyone seems to love Pierre, which, like, I honestly don't understand. I don't really like Pierre that much. Like, I like him because, like, he looks like a cinnamon roll. He is a cinnamon roll. Andre looks like he could kill you. Is actually a cinnamon roll, you know? So this one I really like as well. Drain the blood from men's veins and put in water instead. Then there will be no more war. I'm also really starting to dislike more and more Nikolai. He's just really grating on my nerves. I don't know, but I think just one of the things I want to say is that the character development with Andre is just absolutely out of this world. Like, so much character development in his personal life and stuff like that has happened. This one is one of my favorite passages so far. This is when Andre is going through the forest, and it's talking about the oak tree. It was an enormous tree, its girth twice as great as a man could embrace, and evidently long ago some of its branches had been broken off and its bark scarred. With its huge, ungainly limbs sprawling unsymmetrically in its gnarled hands and fingers, it stood an aged, stern, and scornful monster among the smiling birch trees. Only the dead-looking evergreen firs dotted about in the forest, and this oak refused to yield to the charm of spring, or notice either the spring or the sunshine. Spring, love, happiness, this oak seemed to say. Are you not weary of that stupid, meaningless, constantly repeated fraud? Always the same and always a fraud. There is no spring, no sun, no happiness. Look at those cramped dead firs, ever the same, and at me too, sticking out my broken and barked fingers just where they have grown, whether from my back or my sides. As they have grown, so I stand, and I do not believe in your hopes and your lies. Oh my god. You know you're going through a rough time when you just project all of your feelings onto an oak tree, but it's just so good. And then just the scene, he meets Natasha and then he goes back to the forest, and suddenly the oak for him is so changed. The old oak, quite transfigured, spreading out a canopy of sappy dark green foliage, stood wrapped and slightly trembling in the rays of the evening sun. Neither gnarled fingers, nor old scars, nor old doubts and sorrows were any of them in evidence now. Through the hard, century-old bark, Even where there were no twigs, leaves had sprouted such as one could hardly believe the old veteran could have produced. Are you kidding me? It's just so good. It's so good. So the part I am now, we've had a few balls in Petersburg, ? And the Rostovs are going through quite a hard time with money. Natasha and Sonia have just had their first ball. Like I said, Andre and Natasha have just met and they danced together, and Pierre's there back with his wife, Helene, and stuff like that. So I'm just really interested to see what's gonna happen, because I'm on book 2, part 3, chapter 18. So I'm just gonna sit down, read some more of this right now. That's how I'm gonna spend a little bit of my morning, and then I guess we'll see what happens. Oh my gosh, he's crying. I just don't understand why people don't like Andre. I love Andre so much. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Why? I just don't stop. I can't stop. I just honestly don't know if my heart can take it anymore. Like, I literally just had to stop. And like, I just want to cry again because, okay, in the midst of a phrase, he ceased speaking, a thing he had thought impossible for him. He looked at Natasha as she sang, and something new and joyful stirred in his soul. He felt happy, and at the same time, sad. He had absolutely nothing to weep about, yet he was ready to weep. What about? His former love, the little princess, his disillusionments, his hopes for the future? Yes and no. The chief reason was a sudden, vivid sense of the terrible contrast between something infinitely great and illimitable within him, and that limited and material something that he, and even she, was. Are you kidding me? I want to cry too. Like, oh my gosh, there's been so much in here about infinity and like the limitless and the undefinable and the sublime even, and it's been from mostly Andre's perspective that we get those lines and those instances, especially with Andre and the sky, and now it's with Natasha as well, which is just so beautiful.